Hi everyone, and thanks for joining me on this IABC webinar. In this session, we'll be examining what the future of work looks like for internal communicators like us, and why that means our internal comms needs to be stepped up to meet the challenge. I'll introduce you to a unique communications framework, which will help you to improve your comms performance, and I'll provide some practical tips to guarantee your messages get seen, get read, and drive action. By doing all of this, we'll not only be lifting the performance of our organization, we'll also be proving the value of internal comms to everyone. And that means increasing the opportunities for us in being seen as strategic leaders at the executive table. And as the theme of this year's conference says, it's about time, right? But first things first, I'm Audrey Chang, and I head up product at SnapComms, an Everbridge company. If you're not familiar with us, SnapComms is a unique communications platform that helps organizations across the world reach and engage their employees better. Our platform includes a range of channels which can be used for things like leadership messaging, change communications, health and well-being, employee engagement, and so much more. My role, leading product, is to help understand the needs and challenges of internal communicators like you, and to provide modern, effective solutions. I've worked in the communications and technology space for over 15 years. A quick bit of housekeeping before we begin. This session will be recorded, and we'll be sharing it with you later. Everyone is placed on mute for the duration of the webinar. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions today, but you'll see my contact details at the end, so please don't hesitate to get in contact if you have any questions. Now let's get started. As we've all seen, the world has gone through a huge period of change in the last 18 months. The way we used to live and work suddenly changed, and we're all forced to adapt quickly. But even now, in the middle of 2021, the change is still going on, and it's going to continue to affect the way that we work and the way that we communicate with our employees. Before 2020, we were all working in our busy corporate offices as usual. Then during 2020, everyone was working remotely from their home, office, or dining room, or bedroom, or kitchen counter. Does that sound familiar? Now in 2021 and beyond, the situation will be different again. In some cases, staff will return to working centrally. In others, they'll remain working from home. And in others, they'll do a bit of both, spending some days in the office and some at home. The way we work is continuing to change. And that's a challenge for all of us as communicators, but also an opportunity to prove the value that we bring. 2020 was a massive year for internal communications. Never before have businesses across the world relied so much on the power of communications to keep their staff informed, engaged, and inspired, all while a major crisis unfolds around us. The change from centralized workplaces to dispersed workplaces was a huge shift. The ways we were accustomed to communicating with staff, the types of messages we sent, suddenly weren't relevant anymore, and it fell to us to navigate this, keeping staff connected and engaged while the situation constantly evolved. As a result, our profile and the value we bring as communication experts has never been higher. So it's about time to make this count. All too often, internal comms is excluded from the executive table, but you can shape the future if you can't be there. Sorry, you can't shape the future if you're not there. That's why supercharging our comms effectiveness and proving how this delivers increased business performance is so critical. So now that we've looked back at 2020, let's look ahead to the future of work. What will the communications environment we'll be working in for the rest of 2021 and beyond look like? You might have seen in the news recently that Spotify is one of the companies to introduce a work from anywhere model, where staff aren't required to work from a centralized office. Other companies haven't gone quite as far as this, but we're instead moving into a hybrid model, where staff work partly at home and partly in central offices. For example, at JP Morgan, employees can work from home on some days, but not on Mondays and Fridays. Many businesses are also restructuring their teams and introducing new processes to better align their businesses for what it needs to be successful in the post-COVID world. Internal communications will need to enable this future of work through clear and authoritative messaging. It must build trust in leadership, rebuild workplace culture, assuage the concerns employees have, And above all, it will need to be effective. Communicators will need to be able to guarantee employee readership. For communication professionals, this means recalibrating your communication strategy to optimize performance. It means constructing messages in a way that maximizes readership and delivering them in the channel best suited for what you need to achieve. By doing this, you benefit the business and yourselves as senior business experts. Let's look into the role of communications in 2021 and beyond in a bit more detail. Communication is the biggest influence on transformation success. At companies where management communicate openly about the transformation's progress, employees are 8 times more likely to report a successful outcome. According to a Quantum Workplace study, you'll see in the chart that we've identified 4 key areas internal comms needs to focus on. Firstly, leadership communications. Regular messaging from your CEO or other leadership is necessary to keep staff informed, convey leadership support, and reinforce the company position on important topics. As the stats show, the majority of employees want to hear from their CEOs on significant workplace issues. Secondly, change communications. Your organization could be preparing any number of major changes, from returning to centralized work to a company-wide restructure to a digital, I apologize, I've been advancing my slides a little quickly here. So your organization could be preparing for a number of major changes, from returning to centralized work to a company-wide restructure to a digital transformation initiative. It's critical that staff are communicated to and engaged throughout to overcome resistance and ensure success. You can see just how important it is when 83% of CEOs want their employees to return to the office, but only 10% of employees actually want to return. Definitely a challenge for change comms there. Thirdly, health, safety, and wellness. The world is still going through one of the biggest health scares we've ever seen. And while vaccines are being rolled out in many parts of the world, it's only natural for staff to still feel a little anxious. Health, safety, and well-being will continue to be a focus for internal comms, helping to build trust in the measures employees have taken to protect staff and the business. And finally, workplace culture and engagement. Without common working areas and shared experiences of the office, many staff have felt isolated from colleagues during the coronavirus lockdowns. As a new normal of working takes shape, communications will need to place more emphasis on rebuilding workplace culture. It's not just about promoting team building events, it's about making employees feel comfortable with readjusting to whatever the new working environment is and facilitating support when it's needed. So as you can see, internal comms will need to wear a lot of hats this year. Communications will serve many different purposes. They'll need to be delivered differently, reach staff differently, and achieve different outcomes. And that's why internal comms needs a new approach to effectively deliver to all of these goals. Traditional ways of communicating won't cut it in the working environment of 2021 and beyond. In the past, staff have been flooded with messages through a single channel, urgent and non-urgent messages blended together without a way to prioritize which are most important. Every piece of communication is competing for employee attention. It's impossible for staff to read all of these messages while also performing their job. This results in something called attention management, where staff only pay attention to messages they know to be useful and relevant to them. You've probably heard the stat from Towers Watson that half of all internal communications aren't read. If your communications are the 50% of messages that staff aren't reading, your efforts are wasted. More importantly, messages don't get through. The effectiveness of the channel is diluted and the business performance is compromised. Now is the time for a new approach. As employers around the world begin bringing their employees back to the office, leadership must act now to ensure that when they return, workplaces are both productive and safe. Internal comms fulfills a vital role in achieving the business's goals, and supporting the information needs of employees. It's about sending the right message to the right audience in the right way to achieve the best results. And by doing that, proving the value that you as the communications expert brings. You've got the skills, you just need the right tools to maximize your efforts. This is the core of our communication spectrum framework. It takes the messages we need to send and considers the characteristics of each channel to understand which method of communication is appropriate for each. The messages you need to send are matched with the channel most optimized for success. It's a powerful new approach to communication that aligns business objectives with the communication outputs. You can see in the image a number of reasons why we communicate with employees. We've grouped these use cases into familiar categories like emergency comms, health and safety, and business operations. You'll see that these use cases are plotted in a continuum that ranges from mission-critical communication that needs to be intrusive to good-to-know messages that should be more unobtrusive and not interrupt staff. Critical messages need fast cut-through so that staff can act now, whereas social messages drive behavioral change and support employee engagement. Let's look at some examples. Fire in the building is a life or death situation where all employees need to know and to take action, that is, to evacuate. However, on the opposite side of the spectrum, a social gathering or mental health awareness campaign isn't urgent. It's good for people to know, but they don't need to stop what they're doing right now to read it immediately. In the middle, we have other use cases, like an unplanned system outage, which is quite a priority. We want affected staff to be aware the system isn't working so that we can apply workarounds and not flood the IT help desk with calls. Likewise, reinforcing strategy is relevant to most staff and leaders want high readership, but it isn't urgent. Now let's bring this to life with some example messaging for specific use cases at every stage along the spectrum. As we go, we'll provide best practice tips to improve your messaging based on the type of communication you're sending and where along the spectrum it sits. So first off, let's look at critical. When we have a fire warning and staff need to evacuate immediately, this is delivered full screen with a red hazard outline to give it the highest visibility. So our tips here are really use a consistent representation of brand, style, and manner. A message of this importance needs to be immediately recognized for what it is. Our second tip is targeting the right audience. You don't want to scare people who aren't in the building. So you want to make sure that you really segment your staff list into groups by location, role, department, or whatever. Now, looking at priority, let's think about an unplanned system outage where staff need to be made aware. This type of use case could occur more frequently as businesses begin to migrate back to central workplaces. So our tips here are really, using visual cues with identifiable icons and colors that make people recognize the message fast. It provides a sort of mental shortcut. In the case of system outage, we could use a traffic light system, for example, where a red icon indicates an outage, amber is that it's being worked on, and green that it's been resolved. So some interesting results that we've seen is that another effective channel for priority messages are scrolling tickers, a bit like the news feeds that you see at the bottom of the screen on CNN or any other news network. Using SnapComm's tickers instead of emails has resulted in 2,000 fewer emails sent over the network at the technology service provider NSYST. Now let's take a look at important messages. For example, a new compliance policy that has been created and staff need to accept that they've read it and will comply with it. Again, this is a scenario that you're likely to have encountered with all the current workplace changes that are happening. The compliance alert example shown here is where is one that includes a mandatory I comply button, which staff must select to acknowledge their compliance and often feeds into our records. So the tip that we have here is that not every message will be read the first time it's sent. So use recurrence to make sure that important messages are read and acted upon. Recurrence means that messages are repeated until they're read. A short time period for recurrence equals a higher impact, which equals a quicker response. So taking a look along the continuum here at relevant, this is a very common type of message at the moment, a leadership update, right? The CEO has recorded a short video message on the state of the business, which all staff should see. It's being delivered as a video alert, which pops up on an employee's computer screen. So the tips that we have here are keep it brief, only one idea per message. Remember, most of the workforce is used to social media, so short, concise, to the point messages work best. Keep to one idea per message unless it's a newsletter. The next tip we have here is use design elements and movement to make your message more appealing. Slight animations or scrolling tickers are effective because people are conditioned to see movement, so their brains are trained to take notice. Some of the results that we've seen, at KPMG are that promoting events using SnapComm Screensaver achieve a 400% higher employee attendance at their events. And as we continue along the spectrum here, let's have a look at engaging. Here we have employee health check survey. This is extremely important as staff begin returning to the workplace. We need to know if anyone is feeling unwell in order to keep everyone protected. How are staff feeling? Do they have any symptoms of illness? Surveys are ideally suited for capturing this essential information. So the tips that we have here are where your message appears on screen can make a difference. At SnapComms, we use full screen for critical, centered for very important messages, upper right for operational messages, and lower left for HR and cultural messages. Another tip that we also have is that people want to read things that are interesting, appealing, and creative. So include imagery. Vary the language and tone and make the titles interesting. Consider what's in it for them. Why should they read this? Put yourself in the audience's shoes so that you can understand how they want to be communicated with. So an interesting stat here that we have is that the employee response rates increased by 20% using SnapComm surveys at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. So we're really seeing results with using these different channels and using these different methods. So, and finally, when we're thinking about at the very far right of the spectrum, looking at social, work has to be a fun place to come to as well. People have to enjoy it. So some lighthearted social messages play an important part. They're non-essential, but contribute really to that positive workplace culture. And in today's changing times, this is more important than ever. Examples should include a company celebration or recognizing a major achievement. So some tips that we have here are people learn and like different things. So make your content fun, relatable, colorful, if your audience appreciates it. Repeat your key messages across multiple channels to increase awareness and recall. Lastly, our final tip is, it's important to spread your communications across the spectrum. Prioritize those messages where you need immediate cut through by using the highest impact channels. Deliver less pressing messages that drive behavioral change or promote a positive culture through channels that are engaging but less obtrusive. Now, obviously, we know SnapComms is unlikely to be the only communication platform that you'd use at your organization. So what we've tried to do here is plot how other channels fit across the spectrum. This is somewhat subjective, but we've also really tried to look at the strengths of those platforms to see where they best fit. SnapComms has great coverage across the spectrum because we have a great diversity of channels and different ways of being able to deliver those messages. However, it is worth considering the tools and platforms you have within your organization. How are they being used? What are the communication outcomes that you're expecting? And does that align to the communication spectrum? Are you using the right tools for the right message? And does that achieve the outcome that you need? Remember, effective internal communications is essential in 2021 and beyond. Following the approach laid out in the communication spectrum will not only make your comms look good, it'll also make you look good too. So to sum it up, with the evolving future of work and all the changes that this will entail, we know that there will be a range of communication use cases across your organization, all with very different messaging needs. Understanding this communication spectrum has been essential for us at SnapComms to develop ways in which we can help organizations communicate more effectively. Having a balanced communication landscape that uses multiple means of reaching staff, depending on the intended outcome, is the foundation for driving employee engagement, improving the business, and highlighting yourself as a business superstar. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been my pleasure taking you on this journey of internal comms, the past, present, and future. I hope you found these insights useful. But as always, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and there's plenty more to say on the subject and plenty more discussion for us. So if you have any questions or you'd like to keep the conversation going, please do visit the SnapComms website, or please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to speak to you. Thank you.